is a Bramble Jam podcast.
Welcome to Girls Gone Hallmark, a Hallmark review podcast. I'm Megan, and I'm a longtime Hallmark fan.
I'm Wendy. I'm a former Hallmark hater.
Today, we are joined by Hallmark writer extraordinaire Nina Weinman, who has 36 writing credits, including this weekend's The Perfect Setting, airing on Saturday, January 25th. Some other notable movies you might recognize, favorites around here: A Carol for Two, Haunted Wedding, Catch Me If You Claws, Flip That Romance, Pumpkin Pie Wars, one of Wendy's favorites. Nina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We
trying to do this for a while. So
I know. It's been a long time coming. I'm so glad we could make it happen.
Work it out. Yeah.
We did just wrap the holiday season, and you had 3 movies come out in a really short period of time. You had Haunted Wedding, A Carol for Two, Mrs. Miracle, and now The Perfect Setting, like back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
You have been quite busy.
Yes.
Is that typical for you that you have so many projects overlapping?
Yeah. Generally, I have anywhere between 3 and 6 projects in development at any given time. Right now, I'm waiting for a couple to see if they're going to get picked up. But right now, I only have 2, and that's really thin for me for my schedule. But I have a bunch of pitches in that, hopefully they'll pick up, or they call me a lot to do rewrites. So often, because I work so much for Hallmark, I kind of let them dictate my schedule, that I'll have things that are on the docket for 2025, and they'll call me and go, I need you to put that aside because we need this rewrite done for, it's something that's slated for summer or fall or whatever. They'll tell me how to prioritize my projects. So it's not super overwhelming, except when they all happen at once.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Which does happen. That happened with Mrs. Miracle. I had a couple of other things, and Mrs. Miracle was originally not written for Christmas. It was just a family coming home for their grandmother had passed away, and it sat on the shelf for a while. It was done for a while, and it sat on the shelf because they were like, it's not Christmas, and we feel like Mrs. Miracle really needs to be Christmas. I said, great, let me know. I'll make it Christmas. And they called and they were like, okay, we need it for Christmas and we need it this year. So they bumped me off something else and had me do Mrs. Miracle right then. So they tend to dictate priorities based on what slots they need.
You mentioned rewriting. For people outside of the industry like us, what's that process like? I mean, has someone submitted a script and it's just not like the Hallmark formula that they bring you in for, or?
It varies.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect Setting was a rewrite, and they came to me right before production. They were like, we're starting prep on Monday and we need this script. It's just not quite where we need it to be. So that was a 9-day turnaround for me, because they were already in Belgium and location scouting. That's not the norm.
Yeah.
It was, written by a couple of wonderful writers, Canadian writers. And it just, I don't even know what the process was up to that point to get it where it was, but it wasn't ready, but they had it slotted. So they brought it to me, and I just worked 24/7 for 9 days so that and was communicating with them while they were in prep and saying, this character's gone, don't cast that one, things like that.
Wow.
But this location is gone, tell me what locations you found, I'll write those into the script now. So it was that one was super fluid. That's not always the case. Haunted Wedding was a rewrite also. And it was, I believe, a spec script from Rod Spence, who was the original writer. It was his wonderful idea. And Aisha Francis, they had done a couple of drafts. And this happens to all of us as writers, that you're so close to something. And I have been replaced on my own projects before. you need to bring in fresh eyes. So sometimes they'll say, you know what, it's just not getting there. And they'll say to me, we need to put somebody else on this project because it's not getting there. And you're so close to it. It's a lot easier for me to figure out how to fix somebody else's work than it is to fix my own. So with that one, they had gone through the development process for a while. And so they brought me on and it needed fresh eyes. And so we were able to, it was a pretty big overhaul, but there's a thing that we as writers call getting noted to death, where you get so many notes that you don't know what to do with it anymore. After, a third draft, a fourth draft, after however many, you're just like, your head is spinning and you're like, I don't even know what this is anymore. So sometimes it is the best thing for the project to like take me off of it and put somebody else on and let them get it there. And I've had projects where I was like relieved to be taken off because I just didn't know how to fix it anymore.
Oh, interesting.
That's so interesting. Like, I never thought of that part of it. Do you find as a writer, like, you write the script and so you start with a story in mind, and when you realize it's not going to be that, sometimes it's hard to reroute to a completely different story?
I would say probably 75-80% of the time, the final product is not exactly what I originally pitched. The great thing about it is it's no longer my story. Once it goes into development, now it's ours. So the collaboration aspect, which for me as a writer and being very like solitary in my workday, I love that collaboration. And sometimes it is like, oh, that's a great idea. I wish I had thought of that. They definitely morph and develop and change over time as you're developing a project. But it's a collaboration. And then sometimes when we bring a director in, it morphs even further. And that's okay because it's always about what is best for this project. And that's, I think, all of our philosophy is what's going to make the best movie. I'm not precious about my stories in general. I have a tendency to go, okay, I'm not going to die on this hill for a plot point that's not working.
That's really interesting. Have you always been that way when you say you're not precious about these stories? Because I feel like it's a super, like your perspective, you're like, it's great to have a collaboration. And me, I'm the kind of person who's like, can I offer you a suggestion? I'm like, oh God, please. I can't, I'm going to take it so personally.
Well, that was absolutely a growth process as a writer because, I've been doing this now 15 years as a working writer. And oh my gosh, like there are some notes that you're just like, you learn how to, let it just roll off your back because it's in the beginning when you're putting your heart and soul into a project, it's very personal. And it's a process to learn that this is not a slight. It's not about you. Learning how to be a collaborator is one thing that writers very early on, it's an adjustment because we are so solitary. And when you're first starting out or when you're writing spec scripts and trying to get a career as a writer, it's just you. And that is not the case when you're being paid to write. You are being paid, you have a boss that you have to report to. And the boss wins. I think a lot of writers have a hard time at first adjusting to that and accepting that all of us have the dream that we're going to turn in a script and they're going to go, it's perfect, no notes. That has never happened and that will never happen. Ever.
So for writers who are getting into it, like, would you just suggest they get into like collaborative groups where they're getting that feedback, at least from their peers? Or
feedback is so crucial. And that doesn't mean that feedback is always right.
Right.
But there's a difference between notes from peers that you respect and notes from somebody who is paying you to write something. If you're being paid to write and you're fighting notes a lot of the time I think writers bite notes because they just don't want to do the work.
Oh.
That's kind of the ugly truth of this. But you may get notes from a friend that you think are totally wrong, and you don't have to take them. You may get notes from a network or a studio that you think are totally wrong, and you got to figure out how to make that work.
If you like working.
Their notes win.
Hired
And
again.
that's another thing that I think I've learned throughout my career, and it's taken a while to figure out, is I don't like this note, but how do I address it so that everyone is satisfied? Mm-hmm. And there's a way to do that. And sometimes it's about, I had a mentor who, when you first join the Writers Guild, they assign a mentor to you who helps you like kind of navigate the process and stuff. And my mentor is the showrunner of NCIS. And he, I would reach out to him and be like, I don't know what to do. I just got all these notes. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And he would say to me, always look for the note behind the note, because what are they trying to say? If you don't understand what the notes mean, read them all, step back, take a look at it. What is the note behind the note? And it helps. You get it. You can figure it out when you stop being precious and insulted and upset about it, and just really look at it from a practical standpoint. And that's a skill I think that writers learn the more they go, and the more they're hired to do things they may not agree with.
Yeah, I think that's great life advice in general. Any feedback, like step back and look at it. What are they really trying to say here?
Right.
And move forward with that. So
That
that's
might
really
not
good
be
advice.
delivered in the most eloquent or the most delicate manner. And, I tell that to my kids too, as just like kind of a life lesson, is that nobody is here on this earth to coddle you except me.
Yeah.
I'm here to coddle and nurture you. But in the real world, your teachers, your friends, your bosses, all this stuff, they're not going to coddle you. So you have to learn how to take criticism, but not let it in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a skill. That is a skill that,
And it takes time.
It does.
As a writer.
yeah, really the only thing you can do is experience it. Like that's the only way
Yeah.
to practice, is by going through it. You mentioned you've been writing for Hallmark for 15 years. Your first,
About 15, yeah.
yeah, IMDb reports Backyard Wedding in 2010 as your first
Sale, yeah.
movie. Since then, you've written a total of 36 movies, and almost exclusively
36 on air.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you. That's a
Didn't get made. Some may still get made. Some, I would say I probably have written for Hallmark maybe around 45,
oh wow.
including like what I have in development now. Things I did, a couple of uncredited rewrites on 2 movies that were sort of last minute production polishes that I didn't get credit on. One was called At Home in Mitford, and one was called oh my gosh, what is it called? I can't think of it. It was a Christmas movie with Brooke Dorsey and Daniel Lissing.
Wendy looks at me because she thinks I'm the ultimate authority on all things Brooke Dorsey.
I
She's
can't
one of my
remember, but I
favorites.
did, a couple uncredited rewrites that were just like last minute polishes and things like that. So yeah, they've been incredibly good to me. Like I could not be more grateful for this. The industry has had a lot of really horrible years, and strikes and COVID and shutdowns, and I am so thankful that Hallmark has given me a home where I get to do what I love, and I get to do it on a regular basis.
Well, yeah, we were looking at your resume, and like you've kind of been through like a lot of the evolutions happening at Hallmark. So how did you ultimately did you sell a spec script to them? Is that how you ultimately got started?
Yeah. So I was working at Lifetime. I was a development assistant in the movie department. And some of the people that I met when I was working there are still people that I make movies with today. And I had heard my old boss, a woman named Barbara Fisher, was the head of programming at Lifetime. And she was let go, and probably a year later ended up as the head of programming at Hallmark. and I had heard they needed a wedding movie. I had a movie I had put in my notice because I was like, I cannot keep like working all day and then come home at night and write. It was just not tenable. And we were about to get married. My husband had a good job. He was my boyfriend at the time. We were living together. And he was like, you know what? Just, we're fine. Our overhead was like $27 a month. We had this like little apartment. We had no kids yet. You know, it was like no overhead at all. He was like, we're fine. Quit your job and really give the writing a shot. So I put in my notice in 2007 at Lifetime, and I was about to leave, and then the strike of 0708 hit, and I thought that Hallmark was going to buy this Christmas movie from me that Lifetime was like maybe going to buy, but then they didn't. They weren't going to do that for somebody who worked there, because if they did it for me, they had to do it for everyone, and they had all these policies. So I thought Hallmark was going to buy this script. Then the strike hit, and everybody's like potential just went, you know, and it was done until the strike was over. So they ended up making that movie that I thought they were going to buy. Then they ended up making that movie in, I want to say it was like 2014 or 2015.
Oh, wow.
They did end up making that movie years later. So I also say to aspiring writers that sometimes no is just not right now.
Yeah.
Because I've had a lot of things. I had a bunch of projects that they passed on that I revisited and that have been made. It's just a timing thing sometimes. So anyway, I left Lifetime, and the strikes hit, and it actually ended up being 18 months until I actually sold something to Hallmark. I was told that they needed a wedding movie. And so I sat down and I spent a week just like writing nonstop, and I wrote Backyard Wedding as a spec. And I was about to take a job working for some cuckoo, like billionaire guy, like, an assistant job working for some cuckoo bird. And I had an interview. He was in China or somewhere on business, and I had an interview planned with him to get on the phone. I had already met with like the CEO of his company. Like, the job was mine to lose. This was like the last step. I was going to take this job. And it was my husband's birthday. And I kept saying like, he kept postponing our call. Oh, he's not ready yet. Can we do it in an hour? I said, you know what? It was night for us and morning for him in China. And I said, can we do this tomorrow? It's my husband's birthday. We're waiting to go to dinner. Like, can we just do this call tomorrow? And they were like, yeah, sure. So the next morning I'm sitting in acupuncture and I'm like fantasizing, calling these people and saying, I can't take the job. I sold a script, like fantasizing about this. And 5 hours later, I get an email from Barbara at Hallmark that they were buying Backyard Wedding.
Wow.
And I literally called this woman and said, I can't take the job. I sold the script.
Manifesting. That's what you were doing.
It was like, what happened like in the universe that day, and how do I recreate that one? Because that was like, I was just did not want to take this job. So ready to, really get going on my writing and stuff. So they bought the script. I was paid like nothing for it. It was my first, produced project, and you have to pay your dues. The first couple of projects were non-union. I wasn't paid a lot, but it was, it was a movie. I got
your name was on.
I went and visited the set, and I was pregnant out to here, and I was like, please let me not give birth on this set and like ruin the shot. Like, I didn't want. 6 days later, I went and visited the set. My manager came with me. I was super pregnant. And 6 days later, my daughter was born.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe it.
How often do you get to do that, visit sets of movies that you've worked on?
A lot. Like, once COVID hit, I used to go to every movie and like would go up to Canada, and I would try to visit every set. Then COVID hit and I couldn't. My first couple of movies actually shot here in LA.
Oh, nice.
It was awesome. because I wasn't going to be able to go up to Canada for my first movie if I was that pregnant, I
Sure.
wasn't getting on a plane. But yeah, I try to go as much as possible. I really love going to visit the set, and my ultimate goal right now is I want to produce my movies.
Nice.
So I'm learning a lot, and I have a couple of producers who are mentoring me, and I'm going to go on my next one that's going to shoot probably in March. I think it's scheduled to shoot. I'm going to pay my own way to go up for a week of prep and shadow the producers while they prep the movie, because I know what to do once you're in production. That's the easy part. It's not easy, but I want to learn how to prep a movie because I would like to produce them.
How exciting.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
It's like putting together a big puzzle, and I don't like, and I've never been a person who would just turn in my script and go away.
Yeah.
Like, I want to watch every cut. I want to watch the process. I want to see how the editing changes things. I want to see how the music changes things. It's all really, it's just really fascinating to me how a movie gets made. And I want to be a part of all of it and not just the script.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I'm guessing you can't tell us what that movie is that's shooting in March, right?
I don't think I'm allowed to because it hasn't been announced yet, but
March is just around the corner, though. Maybe
Yeah,
it might be
I
a
know.
summer movie.
yeah, it's definitely a summer movie. And I'm not really like, until they announce things, they
Of
don't like
course.
to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I have another Christmas movie that I'm writing now. That'll be
Yay.
this Christmas. It's always Christmas inside my head.
Yeah.
I'm always working on something Christmassy.
Speaking of prep, some of the movies you've written have been like really immersed in like a specific world. Like, I remember Wendy messaged you back when we did Flip That Romance. We just did it just last summer. Because you had like really detailed,
details.
specific, accurate information about like home renovation. Because you, at the time of writing
That
it,
was really important to us.
Were-
And they also, for that movie, they actually built on a set a replica. So they had chosen the two condos that were like a side by side condo. So they had chosen that, and they kind of messed up the outside, but for the construction, they built on a soundstage a replica of the inside, just kind of a bare bones, so that when like Tyler comes crashing through the wall and stuff, that was all on the set, on the soundstage.
So fun.
Yeah, so that they could do like all of the construction and stuff. You're obviously renting somebody's home, and you're not gonna go in there and like knock down their walls and do all of that. While I was working on that one, because that was also a rewrite, and that was one that I was brought on earlier than, not like, oh, we're starting prep on Monday. I was brought on earlier to rewrite that one. And it was a while we were renovating my house. So I had a lot of information as to like all the things that could go wrong while I was renovating my house and writing that movie. And they were really like, our executive at the time, who's not at Hallmark anymore, her name's Lori Furneaux. She was like a big fan of like the home renovation shows. So we would be like, well, I saw this show where this happens, when you're trying to figure out like, what can we do? Because what you do in any of these movies is you give people a setup, a world, and then you just throw a bunch of stuff at them and see how they get out of it, how they fix it, how they, that's script writing. What can I throw at these people to make it harder for them to achieve their ultimate goals? And so we had a lot of options on that one.
Yeah, that was such a fun movie. Thinking of the perfect setting, which we did not know, you only had 9 days to turn around that rewrite, and that's like, immersed in the world of like jewelry making.
So I had the good fortune of the original writers had done all the research on not only jewelry making but Belgium.
Nice.
So what I did when I rewrote it is I would go through and I would say, what are the facts and figures and the things that I want to keep? Because they did the research.
Yeah.
Like that, half of my job was done as far as that goes. I didn't have to I didn't have to spend a lot of time. I didn't have a lot of time. So I didn't have to spend a lot of time learning about how do you make like there were little speeches and things that I would go, oh, there's a nugget in here that sounds like I know what I'm talking about with jewelry making. So I would cut and paste and put it on a separate document. These are all the things that I want to keep in the new draft.
Oh my God.
Did you watch the movie?
We did.
Yeah, so we've seen a rough cut, which is funny to hear you talk about like
yeah.
it's funny to hear you talk about like everything that goes into it because the rough cuts have, you know, like on-screen notes about it and it's so interesting to see.
There were like ADR things.
Yes.
And see in the rough cut. And that rough cut that you probably watched the same one that I watched, it didn't have the music's not in there. This is all the composer. So there was like no music. And it wasn't color corrected. So you can see as it jumps back and forth that kind of things don't match. And
the sound changes. Yes. It's,
it was fascinating on our end.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm watching the story, but I'm also taking in so much about like how different this is going to be from what we're going to see when it airs.
Right. And there would be like lines on screen. That's notes for the network to see that we're going to add an ADR line later where she says, oh, hey, you're early or whatever, to try and just make things track better.
Yeah.
A lot of ADR lines when things are like, we cut this scene and there was this little nugget of information that in the scene that was cut for time, we kind of need that nugget of information. So when we're on Wendy's back and on Megan's face, Wendy says blah, 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 blah. And then we cut to the actual dialogue so that you can add that piece of information in that might be necessary to the continuity of the story.
Yeah.
Did they just send actors to like a local studio to do that sort of thing?
Yeah, they do. They generally do ADR, like if they're in Tennessee. Rachel Boston did ADR in a studio in Tennessee because that's where she lives. They don't make them come.
They're not like flying them back out to the studio. Yeah.
No, I think generally they're able to do it where they are, but sometimes they may need to fly somebody in, or if they're on location somewhere, they have to do ADR, you know, varies. But for the most part, they can find a studio and just do it there and hire a local studio to record.
Did you get to go on set with perfect setting, or was the turnaround too?
No, it was way too fast.
Yeah.
And they shot, oh my gosh, where did they shoot? They shot like 4 days in Belgium. And then they shot in Ottawa. So Ottawa is really beautiful with its sort of like old world European charm that it doubles very well for European cities, as does, oh my gosh, now I can't even think of where, Montreal.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
They both double very easily for these European settings. So they shot most of it in Ottawa and then they went to Belgium for 4 days and they just brought, I think, number 1 and number 2, which the actors on the call sheet are, you know, Lacey would be number 1 and then David Elsendorn? Is that his name? He's so cute.
Right. From Ted Lasso. All from Ted Lasso.
So cute. I thought they were really sweet together. And what we really liked was that there's just a little bit of initial conflict, but we liked having like the secret, like these two. And I a little bit stole from myself when I was pitching them how I wanted to fix it. I a little bit stole from myself and said I did this movie called Pumpkin Pie Wars. Well, it was really fun to have these feuding families and they have sort of a secret and they really liked that idea of how to put that in.
Oh, I love that. One thing I like about this movie that I think viewers should look out for is David, and I don't know if it's an acting choice or not, but like there's a little bit of contention, you know, between the two. Not a lot. It's not like strongly enemies to lovers, but he smiles the entire time he's talking to her. So it doesn't set it up that they're like,
He hates her.
yes, that they're like having to work backwards from this place of like, we hate each other. Like every time he's speaking,
that's what I like,
smiling.
Guys, like I always want them to be a little bit, even if they're kind of snarky, they're a little bit like toying with touring with them. And there's some guy like Chris Palaha was so great about that. Paul Campbell is so great about that. There's some of these actors that are just so good at in other hands they might come across as kind of a jerk, but they just come across as charming, like poke the bear kind of guys that and there are other actors that are great at that too, but I just like in my experience I wrote these characters that could come across as kind of a jerk and they're not because of the hands that they're in with those guys.
Okay, speaking of character choices and the way you write, Wendy has a question. Catch Me If You Clause.
Oh, Catch Me If You Clause.
Oh.
Okay, so this was one of our favorite movies. And you know that steamy kiss scene that Italia Ricci and Luke McFarlane have in the car? Was that your original idea? Did you see that? Like, was that on the page that they would have like this steamy kiss scene, or did that?
So they went way steamier than I would have thought that they would. So that movie shot during the strike, so I couldn't go, and I was devastated because
bummer.
I wrote that movie 10 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
Get out.
10 years ago, I wrote it originally for another network that Hallmark would never, 10 years ago, Hallmark would never have made that movie. Like in the old days, that was like way too broad and comedic and a little bit out there. So I had written that movie for ABC Family back before it was even Freeform. And it was one of the last movies they put in development before they stopped making original movies.
Oh.
And so we, went there, made this really like broad comedy. I think initially they may have been in a phone booth kissing in the really early draft, but Hallmark wouldn't, and back then, have really allowed that, even just like in the old early days. This was 2012.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically because I had a meeting, like our original kickoff meeting, and I had to call them and say, I cannot make this meeting because I am going to the hospital right now. My water broke and my son is being born.
My goodness.
So I had to cancel that meeting. So it was in 2012. And for years I was like, how about now? You guys want to make this? Because they stopped making original movies and they dropped the project. So it came back to me. The rights came back to me. And for years I was like, how about now? How about now? How about now? How about now? And then the executive who was my exec at ABC Family is a woman named Kelly Garrett. And she came over to Hallmark and joined the Christmas team. And she was like, we're going to make this movie. We're finally going to make this movie. She never forgot about it. She always loved it. She's like, we are making this movie. And so finally Hallmark said yes. And we were able to make it.
I'm so glad they did. I think it still remains a standout movie to me.
Yeah. Me too.
Oh, they put a lot of movies out every year. It's like 50 movies, and I still remember Catch Me If You Clause. I love that movie. It was
and
so
they were
great.
both so great together, and they had such good chemistry, and they loved working together. They loved each other. They had such a good time, and so we were like, "You guys want a sequel? We have an idea."
Oh,
I don't know. They're so weird about sequels. Like, everybody wants to make a sequel to their movies, and sequels can be really tricky. And we have a really good idea, but they have it. They've had it for a really long time. I don't know if they'll ever decide to make it, but
that's exciting to know that it's out there, though.
But it's so interesting knowing that script has been out there for so long, because you're right. Like 2012, Hallmark was never going to make a movie, even with a mid-movie kiss, let alone like a mildly steamy
and
kind of public situation.
Back then was everything had to be grounded in reality. There was no fantasy, no magic, no Santa Claus, no reindeer on the rooftops. It was all gonna be like, girl,
you could see yourself in this life.
Plan the gazebo festival in her hometown. Like that was it. That was our like
that was the directive.
It all just had to really. It wasn't only that, but it had to be grounded in reality. They weren't going to do any kind of fantasy stuff. And I think they realized, you know, in the last couple of years with the newer regime, they got to take some bigger swings. And I think they've really paid off. They've done some, you know, Three Wise Men, a Hallmark movie with 3 male leads, like, you know, that kind of stuff is, it's different, but it works, and it's still on brand, because that's the most important thing. Is Hallmark is like a 110-year-old brand. Stay on brand. You know, we're not gonna go crazy and have, you know, oh, they meet in rehab. You know, that's like
We're not going to go too far.
we're
right?
not gonna do that.
Yeah.
There's-
I was wondering, with the changes that are happening over up top at Hallmark right now.
Yeah.
Is that coming down to you yet, in terms of like what you can write or what playland
As far
you
as
can
I
write in?
know, and this is honestly, it all just happened, and then these fires hit, and everybody is sort of right now just like, we're all kind of in survival mode a little bit. There hasn't been a lot of work talk. I mean, at the same time, we're business as usual. Like, they have an amazing team in place that the trains are still going to run on time. As if I know Hallmark, and you know, I'm not privy to a lot of that internal information, but I just can say that I know the people who are still in charge, and those trains are not going to derail. Those trains are going to run on time, and they're still going to have everything done and ready for all of their deadlines, all of their seasons and
All their
stuff.
seasons.
So, you know, as far as the changes, has it affected me? I mean, it's all very new, and we haven't really had a lot of conversations, but I'm business as usual too. I have my marching orders, and I'm just steering clear of any, you know, drama, gossip, any of that, and just like head down doing the work.
Yeah, good.
I think that's how everybody is right now. It hasn't trickled down to me in any, you know, big way.
Good.
Can we throw it back really quickly to, during a very busy season, you also went on the Hallmark cruise, sail number 2.
Yes, I know you guys are on cruise number 1. Wendy, what did you do for clothes?
Oh my gosh. I had to go shopping. Like, I
No.
literally got into Miami that morning, like at 7 a.m., and then met up with her. We hit Nordstrom Rack. I just cleared the shelves.
We Ubered over, bought a suitcase, bought a full like underwear, socks, everything, shoes.
Everything.
And then went to Target and did like the toiletries, and then back to our hotel. She packed a suitcase in the lobby of our hotel that we had already checked out of, because what are we going to do? And then went to the ship. She made it work.
I made it work. Yeah.
Listen,
and then
I was so impressed with, like, every time because I watched all your stories, and every time your attitude about it was just so like, going on a cruise, okay.
I was so deliriously tired. I don't even know. Like, I spent 12 hours in the airport. It was.
Were you so scared that you just weren't going to make it and the ship was going to leave? That would have been my panic.
I think Megan was worried I wasn't going to make it, in terms of like, I was like, I'm going to just get on a plane and go home, because I'm like, this is not worth it.
Well, because the night they canceled her flight, and they were like, your flight's not till noon the next day. And at that point, she wasn't, there was no chance she was going to make it. And I knew that her next step was going to be getting on a plane and going home. And it's 3:00 in the morning. I was like, just stay right there. And I was like, there is a flight in 3 hours at 5:45 a.m. on Spirit Airlines. And I know you would sooner chew broken glass than fly Spirit Airlines. Actually, I'm like, I can't go on this cruise by what am I going to do for a week by myself on this cruise? I don't know anybody. So obviously I wanted her to be there, but it was down to the wire. I was convinced that she was not going to make it.
What time did you get to Miami?
I think it was like 10 a.m.
It was.
Oh, okay. It wasn't like, because the ship left at like, you had to be on board, what, like 4 o'clock?
By 4. So we had a little bit of time. Once she was there, I was like, we're fine. we're fine. There was a Nordstrom rack a
I
mile
needed
away.
underwear and
That's
everything
so
else.
great. And you had a good time.
I had a great time. I'm so glad I made it. I'm so glad I didn't turn around and go home the next day.
Yeah, I can get it. That's an ordeal.
So, what was Jonathan Bennett described Cruise 2 as a younger and drunker crowd? What was your experience like? Yes.
Because I was only on one, so I didn't have any like real
Yeah.
reference. I will say this: I don't have a lot of fan interaction, just
Yeah.
because I'm behind the scenes, and I was so it was so special to get to interact with the fans, to hear their stories. I was on a Zoom yesterday with Paul Campbell and Kimberly Sestad because we're cooking something up together, the three of us, which is I'm super excited about. And we were talking about the cruise because I hadn't talked to them since. We were talking about the cruise, and we said, listen, it's like we're not curing cancer, we're not making Schindler's List, and making people think, and we're not changing the world here. But what we did see and learn from this fan interaction for me, which I don't have often, is that like we're giving joy where joy is needed.
For
and
sure.
It was so touching for me, and just such like I called it. I said to Nikki DeLoach and I she had this like Christmas like sale bazaar thing in her backyard. So I went over there and people were asking us, how was the cruise? I said it was like a giant floating hug.
Yeah.
And she said that is the best way to put it, because they get that a lot. The actors definitely get that a lot. But we just were it was so moving to hear people come up to us and say, Hallmark movies got me through chemotherapy. Or I used to watch with my mom and she passed away last year, and I watched these movies and I can feel her with me. These kind of stories that you're just like, wow, we don't know that this is the impact, but, and for some people it's just comfort food, and it's just, background noise while they fold laundry, and that's okay too, but just learning how much the reach that it has was really special. That was my favorite part of it.
I will say Hallmark has some of the most passionate fans I've ever come across. And, we have our little Girls Gone Hallmark community and Facebook group, and there are some really passionate fans in there who know every detail about things, or will be in there and talk about how the movies made them feel, or there's some sort of emotional connection to it. Like, so your work matters, Nina, and I'm so happy you got to see that on the cruise.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. It was nice to hear. It was really nice to hear. Like, again, I know that we're not, curing cancer, and what we do is just, it has its need and it has its impact. And that was just really special.
Well, I think the choice to have you and Julie on those cruises, I think it was a really smart one, because like you said, the behind the scenes isn't often put in the forefront. And even in like our suggestions, we were like, more of this, like put a whole production team, like the costuming and the how does the movie get made? Because people are interested in this. Like when we have Keith Nielsen, costume designer, on our show, people are so fascinated by like the process. And so like, next year, who knows what the plans are, but we'd love to see like more. We love the actors. Everyone loves the actors. They're the face of the brand, of course. But there's definitely an interest in how the whole process.
People come up to me and say that. A lot of people. What we did, because on the first cruise, I think people got a little prickly about the line for the photo op, because the line was so long, and they kind of figured out like, what are the things that we need to adjust for cruise number 2. So they had quite a few of us going up and down the line, talking to people, introducing ourselves, answering questions. So I met like every fan on that boat. I mean, it was me, it was Jennifer Kramer, who's the head of the Christmas development team. Cass Walker, Andrew Walker's wife,
Oh,
was
wow.
talking to people. Tyler's mom was walking up and down and talking to people for a while. Tatiana Erasme, who's the head of casting, we were just walking up and down that line and talking to people. And I was like, oh, if people care what I have to say, really? Like,
Absolutely.
it was so nice. And the fans were really warm and special. And the number of hugs I got, I was like, oh, thank you. It was really a great experience.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad your experience was positive. I'm really curious to see what the next one's going to look like because I know they're a bigger ship, bigger crowd.
Yeah. And I mean, I haven't heard much. I don't know if they're going to invite me back or if they're going to want to do, other writers for Hallmark or other producers or whatever. I don't know what their plans are. I haven't heard anything. But they know that, I do know that they know that with a ship that's twice the size, they're going to have to double up on everything. Like Jonathan can't do everything. They can't have everything in one place. They're going to have to do a bunch of different simultaneous things. That's all I've heard, because it's just on a small ship, you can do that. But on this ship is like twice the size. Are you going back?
We are not.
We're not.
No.
Yeah.
No, I signed up for the pre-booking and had a great booking time, but we decided that we were going to do something different this year. So
You did it. You went, you broadcast from there, and
yeah. Well, on top of that, we went to Kansas City too in December, right before Christmas. And I was like, put a pin in me. I am done.
Yeah.
Pin, put a fork in me.
I
whatever.
think if the cruise were in the summer, it would be an easier sail. But to do it in November, an easier sail, SALE. I mean, for us, it's hard, to take that much time away, as you well know, during the holidays.
I don't know how the actors did it. They were just nonstop. They had like the bus tour.
I know.
And then they had the cruise, and then there was cruise 2, and then they had Kansas City and Christmas Con. Like, I was talking to Paul Campbell, and he was like I'm not gonna see my son for like
Yeah, they must have been. I mean, Jonathan Bennett, I was like, how are you still standing? And then they're promoting these movies. Yeah.
And then he was doing, I literally was walking through Times Square with my kids on the day before New Year's Eve. We went into New York, but we were in Pennsylvania, and I'm walking and I hear his voice like over the loudspeaker. They were doing some stuff like the day before New Year's Eve.
Yeah, he did a New Year's Eve.
Yeah, he hosted a New Year's Eve.
He and James hosted some New Year's Eve thing in Times Square. We left before New Year's Eve because we were like, get me out of here. This is too many people. But I took my kids in. We just took the train in from Pennsylvania to see a couple shows because we love theater. And so
Yes. I know. I saw that video he posted of people when they like opened the barriers for Times Square New Year's Eve. And I was like, that is my worst nightmare. Like being stuck there for
me standing there with just crowds of people.
Yes, my couch is much more comfortable.
I will happily watch it on TV too. I'm like, nope, hard pass for me.
Nina, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad we got to finally connect. Hopefully we can do this again. Everybody, please check out The Perfect Setting, Saturday, January 25th on Hallmark. And Nina, where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram as Nina Weinman Swift. My husband's a Swift. We're no relation to Swift Trucking or Taylor Swift or any of the good Swifts. But I go by that. Professionally, I've always been Nina Weinman. But on social media, on Instagram, is really the only one I use. I don't do much else. But Nina Weinman Swift.
And we'll leave a link to that in our show notes. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to this episode of Girls Gone Hallmark, a Bramble Jam podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye. All right, friends, before we go, just a quick heads up. You're about to hear some ads. These little gems help us keep the show running and the Hallmark love flowing. So do with that info what you will. Grab a snack, hit the skip button, or maybe, just maybe, listen in and discover your new favorite product. Bye.